Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the Tesla Roadster version of our weekly show. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Thank you for joining us today.
And what you see behind us here stays with the theme, which is, are Tesla Roadsters waterproof? Well, we'll find out. And AI did a pretty good job of giving me an umbrella over a Tesla Roadster. It even spelled Roadster correctly in the upper right-hand corner, but where it failed us was I kept asking it to make sure the car is dry underneath the umbrella, and it could not understand that for whatever reason.
It seemed to not, and you could interpret that this is a very cold rain based on the amount of icicles that it has hanging off that umbrella.
That too. There we go. Got a little better shot of it. So, Roadsters and water do not mix well. And let's go into the first session here for the BMB cover. It's the image under that folder, Jesse. And I've got a sample of it. This is the battery management board cover that closes off 11 slots on top of an ESS battery pack to allow service or removal of the BMB boards in the main battery pack. And normally, this sits there and it is sealed. But what happens, do we have an image of that, Jesse? It's the BMB cover. There we go. You can see the slots there on the left side, and down below that are BMB cards or boards that provide microprocessor-based information back to the vehicle management system, the battery safety management system, giving to the car details about the condition of the battery.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is this cover has to come off in order to pull BMB boards. When it's put back on, you need to put urethane caulk, the flexible type, and I'm going to hold this up a bit here, in this channel here. If we go to the next image here, Jesse, ESS pack wet -1. I'm just going to set this here. There we're showing the immersion sensor inside the battery pack. All right, so this is what your ESS pack looks like after a rainstorm or after a car wash. Unfortunately, the seal between the rear deck lid and that package tray there is not perfect, and water will migrate and lay on top of the battery. And you can see the BMB cover there has some water. If we go to image number ESS pack -wet 2, we're going to show you where the water pools, and if that urethane seal is not there, it can migrate down into the pack. And when it does that, we're going to go to BMB Immersion Sensor image. There is a strip down on the bottom of the main battery pack. And if water hits that, then it will open up the high voltage interlock loop, or the HVIL as they call it. There we go. That's the strip itself. And the image is BMB Immersion Sensor without the -2. And there you can see where it sits in the bottom of the pack. And as water hits it, then you're not going to be able to drive, or it's going to report errors.
I noticed on that, with that piece that we brought in, with the metal lip being higher than the foam insulation or the foam cover underneath it, you're always going to have a metal-to-metal connection. So it makes total sense that you have to put something else to seal it. It's almost like having a garage door on your concrete with no rubber pad underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get that garage door tight enough to actually provide a seal.
Some water will seep in. If it migrates down into the base of the battery pack there, and there you can see the inside, the highlighted portion is the BMB or the BMB immersion sensing strip, as they call it. And there's even a recommendation that if that is ever sensing water or compromised, it should be replaced. Normally, we find that if water gets in there and that top cover is removed and you give it a chance to dry up, then the car continues to operate.
Oh, okay.
So that's the BMB water ingress, and something you definitely want to avoid. We've had cars that have come in where there's been enough water where the car doesn't come back to life, and we have to open it up and clean it up. All right, another area that water can get into or cause problems with your Roadster, and we've reported on this before. In fact, we sent a tech tip to all the owners. It's the charge port. And if we can bring up image number 0A, Jesse, or 0AA, either one of those shows the charge port door. The reason it takes Jesse a while to bring up these images is all he sees is the name. He doesn't see the image itself.
Right.
On our social media console there. There we go. So you're all familiar with that. And if it's functioning fine, you're going to see a variety of different types of blinking lights. When you first open the charge port door, the LEDs are white. When you plug in your charge cable and it makes a connection, you slide the switch forward, it then goes blue and it pulses. And then when it finally satisfies all of the preconditioning requirements, then it starts pulsing amber like this. If you have a problem in this charge port circuitry from water damage, what will happen is either the lights will be inconsistent colors, and we've seen a variety of them, or it's completely dead. There are no lights at all.
Oh, okay.
So you can't really tell if you're charging or unless you look at the vehicle display screen. Now, where the water gets in is 01 imaged, Jesse. And what we end up doing is we waterproof these, and there are a variety of steps that we take to do this. But the seepage typically occurs where those arrows are. And because the charge port is angled slightly, and it's not a great seal, water can migrate, hit that seam, and then get down onto a circuit board. And image 01A will show you the circuit board that it eventually hits behind all of that plastic mounting surface. And you can see the LED rings there. Or the actual LEDs. In the right-hand portion is a housing that sits on top of a connector. And if we go to image 02, you can see the amount of damage that takes place when you get water into that housing and it pools and collects, and you have constant voltage on those pins or those connections. Now what you end up doing is electroplating. You get electrolysis that takes place because you're moving electrons around through a fluid, and it's going to move metal around. This is copper oxide primarily, all of that green buildup. And we've seen cases so bad that the pins actually completely corrode away. So now you've lost the connection. In another image here, let's go to 04A. There's a TVSS chip on there, transient voltage surge suppression strip, that protects the circuitry against spikes and transients as you're charging or as you're plugging in and out. There's an example of that chip completely corroded away. So what we end up doing to repair this is an image 06A. We first of all replace the connector. We clean up any of the etches, all of the copper oxide, all of the corrosion that's on that board. And then the final step, after we put that housing back on, after we've cleaned it, we then inject a silicone compound into that housing, which now completely seals it from any water. And then that seam that we showed you earlier, we actually close off that seam. So even if water gets down into the charge port, it can no longer migrate onto this board or into this connector housing.
Well, the angle that charge port sits in the car makes it like a cup almost to hold water.
Exactly. Yes, it
So
will hold it. Yeah.
Water gets in there and it just doesn't go away. It'll either eventually leak out into something or just have to evaporate.
Right. Now, the way to prevent this is do not leave Roadsters outside. Do not
Mm-hmm.
leave them out in the rain. Definitely do not store them in the rain. We have a customer that said, I went on vacation. My Roadster was outside. I live up in the Pacific Northwest, and my car isn't running when I got back. I've got high voltage interlock problems. It won't charge, it won't operate. Um, Again, leave the Roadsters inside. If you're sending your car or taking your car to a service center, make sure that they keep your car inside or under a carport to avoid getting water near this connector or on this connector or your charge port. Now, the problem is we can rebuild the majority of these circuit boards, but not all. Sometimes they get corroded so badly that the only option you have is replacement.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is not a part that is easily replaced because with most Roadster parts, they're now in short supply. We've been able to procure some brand new boards and have those in inventory for those times when the corrosion is just too far gone and we can't rebuild it. The other thing that we ran into is these types of LEDs are actually multicolored. So in one LED, by putting voltage onto different pins, you end up with a different color.
Mm-hmm.
That particular configuration type LED is no longer in existence. They don't make them anymore. There's a replacement, but it's different pin configuration. So you have to modify the circuit board or create jumpers.
Okay.
We were fortunate that we were able to contact the original vendor that built these boards. And they said, we don't have any in inventory, any of these LEDs in inventory. However, we have some rejects, a few hundred of them. Are you interested in those? And they actually gave those to us. They were the ones that had a yield problem.
Okay.
We ended up receiving a few hundred. They didn't charge us anything for them, which was extraordinarily nice of them. They realized that we're helping and supporting the Roadster community. And we ended up testing, and only about 10% of them had any defects. So we do have some LEDs back in stock now.
Oh, that's wonderful. One-time stocking of the LEDs, obviously.
Yep. All right, so that's another area that you can have problems in your Roadster. And of course, again, don't leave it out in the rain. The next one is going to be the HVAC controllers. Those are electronic devices that are enclosed in aluminum housings that sit out underneath the front, underneath the hood vanes.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been nice if they were inside the cabin somewhere, but I think they ran out of room, for all
Right,
the
I
stuff
think so.
that they had to put in. Now, the biggest problem is with the 2.x controllers, which is actually smaller than the 1.5. Both of these are made by a company in Europe, Eberspacher. They're not being made anymore. They're not going to make anymore unless you're able to accommodate an extraordinarily high MOQ, minimum order quantity, which with only 2,000 customers left is just not attainable.
Right.
So the only way to keep these things alive is to rebuild them and then to weatherproof them. So the first image that we can pop up here is the HVAC controller, Jesse, and this is showing a 2.x controller that is underneath the hood vanes. We've got the hood popped up so you can see its proximity. There's some orange Yazaki connectors there, which is also something that we're having a very hard time finding, although they typically don't go bad. But this HVAC controller is basically out there in the elements. So if you're driving through rain or snow or whatever, it's going to have some buildup on this controller. Here's where the problem occurs. Let's go to HVAC controller LED. And I'm going to show you a couple of things here that fail on this controller as they age. The first one is gaskets. That box on the left there, you see those two covers?
Mm-hmm.
Those are gaskets that are separating the cover from the housing. And as with any gasket, over time they compress, they crumble. They eventually get to a point where water ingress can occur. They're no longer sealing the outside from the inside. Then there's a little LED. I have an arrow pointing there. And there's another image there, Jesse. I actually went over this morning and got a better shot of that. It's HVAC controller LED detail. This little LED is typically what kills this controller. There we go. It's a tiny, small red LED that illuminates when you've got the high voltage interlock activated, telling whoever's looking at it that you've got high voltage available. The problem is, this is aluminum casting. They took a little LED, stuck it in the hole without any gaskets.
So no gaskets, no seal, no nothing.
No nothing. It's tight enough in most cases, but when you get water in past that, and it does happen, inside that little box is a circuit board. And on that circuit board, you have two different voltages. You have high voltage, which is why they have orange connectors. Remember, in the world of EVs, it's color-coded. Everything else is different colors, but orange denotes high voltage. So you have 400 volts on that board, on that circuit board, inside that housing. If it gets wet, you've got chips, you've got 12-volt devices as well that are functioning. And when the 400 volts crosses over to the 12 volts, which it will with water, which is somewhat conductive, now you burn up boards, chips, and components. There's a company in Switzerland that actually makes a replacement for this HVAC controller. GS Technologies, right around Lake Constance, Bodensee, as we say in German. And they have perfected a replacement product for this. But in the meantime, if you want to get yours repaired, fixed, we also do that. And then we weatherproof them. We put new gaskets on, and we take that LED, and here's something that you can do. That little LED, again, will allow water to get into that box. You can take some super glue and just put that around the perimeter of that LED. The super glue dries translucent, so you still see the LED, but you've closed off the gap. And that will now prevent the water getting in through that little LED housing or that hole. The gaskets, that's a different story. We actually cut those here, and we replace them.
Okay.
Okay. This particular customer that prompted us to do this this podcast said, I was out of state a couple of months and came home to errors on my 2008 Tesla Roadster with a 3.0 2018 battery upgrade. My heater doesn't work. It was sitting outside in the rain. Pretty mild climate here in Washington State, but wet. So anyway, don't leave your Roadster outside is the first rule.
While you're pulling up the next picture, we have a couple of comments. I am College says, how can I get a Gruber shirt? I need to represent. I'm sure he's talking about this guy right here.
Yeah. And this one, Jesse, is Victor any closer to actually having anything on our store?
Not yet, but I can work with him on that because he's made a couple of cool designs. I think you've actually had him make a few recently of like Tesla designs, other stuff. So we can see if we can whip something together.
One of them says, don't panic. And then down below it says, call Gruber Motors.
Yes.
And something about a Tesla Roadster will round out your life or something. I forget now. There are many things in life.
He's got some really cool ones.
But yeah, we're working on it. Highlander's joining us. Welcome. He says, I don't think I'd like to try that in my garage. Okay. And then Brian Andanje from Facebook says, good work. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
You know, it's our technicians, engineers, and mechanics next door that are coming up with these solutions for the Tesla Roadster. All right. So the next one is AC condenser failure. And see if I can find that here. It's probably under a different...
And we were looking at the AC condenser failure and the images prior to the podcast. I don't know where they happened to go this time.
Are you looking for the condenser fan 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the same folder under HVAC
Oh,
controller.
HVAC controller. Yeah, you're right. There
I'll bring those up.
Okay. All right, let's bring up HVAC Condenser Fan Dash 2. That'll be the first one. And it was actually Neil Wise in the UK that first alerted us that this is becoming a problem in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
This condenser assembly normally in a car would sit vertical, like your radiator, for example. And if anything falls on it, it's not going to collect, it's going to fall off. In the Roadster, however, this thing sits like a shelf almost at a 30-degree angle in the front. And again, the front of a Tesla Roadster is not sealed. You have hood vanes, you have large openings there, and rain, water, leaves, debris can get in between those hood vanes. There's about a 1.5 to 2 inch gap oftentimes. As leaves collect on this condenser assembly, and you have continuous wet conditions, eventually the leaves turn acidic. And these condenser tubes are very thin, of course. So as it becomes acidic, it eventually eats through the condenser tubes, and now you have leaks. Your freon's leaking out fundamentally.
Sure, you have all the conditions needed, an acidic element, a little bit of water to continue to wash away the aluminum, and of course the reaction.
Mm-hmm. One of the fixes for this is pay attention to your condenser in the front of the Roadster, and periodically blow out the leaves or any accumulated debris, because you don't want that sitting on top of this condenser and sitting there wet, because it will eventually begin to work its way into the aluminum. There's another picture of this, the back side, or the top side actually. You can see the 2 Spall fans that are used to cool. And we have these condenser assemblies in stock, by the way. So thanks to Neil Wise for pointing out that 2 things. You don't want to leave your Roadster out in the rain, and you want to make sure that your leaves or any debris that's on your condenser gets removed. And then finally, we have the notion of storing your Roadster outside. Now, in Phoenix, Arizona, you're probably not going to have as big an issue, although the sun is going to eat away at your leather or your vinyl and your seats.
Yeah, UV rays are not good for the vinyl and for the paint and for the leather and all that stuff.
Yeah. But there's another compelling reason to not let Roadsters sit outside. Let's go to rodent damage, Jesse. Rodents like to take up residence and build nests in Tesla Roadsters, or any vehicle for that matter. And they like eating the soy-based insulation that's in the wiring harnesses. What we're showing here is a dash where a rodent had built a nest off to the right there. And there's an even more telling image, which is number 2. And they don't only eat the soy-based insulation on the wire. That's what they like to ingest. But when they're building nests, they don't become choosy anymore. It doesn't have to taste good anymore. What they'll do is chew into rubber hoses, your carpeting, or anything else that they can nibble on, including seats and leather.
Even seat belts. I remember us seeing a bunch of the
Chinese Roadsters.
The nylon from the seat belt was largely chewed through because they found it was nice and soft for nesting material.
Exactly. And when those Tesla Roadsters are finally taken apart, the Chinese Roadsters, I'm sure they're going to find some nests, most likely underneath that tray, that front dash tray.
Yes.
The final picture we have here, Jesse, is number 3. And there you can see the nesting material that they've collected. And if you had a forensic capability, you could probably trace that back to exactly what that is, whether that was carpeting. There's a broader view, but number 3 shows the nesting material up close. There we go. This type of damage does a number of things. It creates a hygienic problem. It's going to smell in the car. It's also going to get into your air vents. They will populate in those as well. And it's usually a major project to not only repair all the wiring harnesses, but to get the nesting material out, sanitize. We use an ozone generator often to get rid of the odors inside the cabin after this event. But the point here is, do not leave your Roadster outside. It probably will do better inside a garage, although rodents could get in a garage. Get yourself a cat. A barn cat would be perfect. Don't feed it for a while, and it'll clear out all of your
It
rodents.
sure will.
And again, if you're taking your Roadster to an independent service center or a Tesla service center, make sure that they are storing your car inside. All right. Do we have any additional questions?
We have two more. On Instagram, I am Kolajay says I'm in Deer Valley. Now, I think we might have been extended this invitation to you before, but in case we haven't, please come over and stop by. I'd love to give you a tour of the facility.
Mm-hmm.
On Instagram as well, EV Smoke ATX is ATX showing love. He says, you guys, when you get a chance, check out our one-of-one customer drag racing plaid. We're letting people know that EVs can do it too.
Absolutely, yes. They had to rewrite the quarter-mile drag strip rules after the grocery getter EV sedans began to click off 10-second quarter-mile runs. When they'd send them home and say, you need a roll cage, you're going, what? I get groceries with this. Grandma sits in the back. How are we going to do a roll cage, right?
Yeah.
Pete.
Yeah.
There was a video I saw on Twitter on X yesterday of a Kawasaki H2, which I think Cass will like. It's like a super bike that apparently has a top speed of 230 miles an hour or something. It was, they had a rolling start and it was dead even with the plaid. Now, eventually, the plaid tops out at 200, so it would have won, but they were staying right next to each other the whole time.
Yeah.
You also have to take into account that one is a car and the other one is a bike. So the mass is different. One is clearly heavier than the other. So that should show you how impressive these things can be.
I also find that when I do race someone, which I do infrequently, of course, I want to go on record here, and I've got a crotch rocket next to me at a red light, they have one wheel on the ground. I have four, and I have all-wheel drive. So for the first 150 feet, I own the road. I watch them in my side view mirror with their front wheel up, trying to keep up. But then after that, of course, they'll blast past me at 90 miles an hour, and I'm not the guy that's going to do 90 miles an hour on residential streets.
Right. I can imagine, Pete, you only race these guys infrequently.
Yes.
It's only when you get to a light.
Yeah. All right. Log files. We have customers that send us log files a couple times a week or more at this time. And here's typically the reason that they do that. There's something wrong with a Roadster. Well, before they take it to Tesla Service Center and go through that commitment, and sometimes that's a couple hundred miles away because not all of them accept Roadsters anymore, it's handy to get a log file and we'll do a free analysis. What we and the reason that the log file is valuable is, let me give you some statistics. The Roadster log file contains usually around 300,000 records or more of various types. Much of it is historical data from the past few months, while other bits of data go back to the birth of the Roadster. And yes, Tesla Roadsters have birthdays. That was one of the ways we determined what the mileage was on the Chinese Roadsters.
That's right.
And on the world's lowest mileage Roadster at 38 miles an hour. It was all in the log files. They say that much of this information is not available on the vehicle display screen on your VDS, even with verbose logging or debug alert text enabled. So as a result, a log file in a Roadster tells a much more detailed story about your Roadster. It tells us from a service standpoint what's going on underneath the hood. The fault records are permanent and are quite useful in identifying current, historical, or here's the important one, or pending issues, trends that are evolving.
Yes.
Things you may not even be aware of yet that are not showing up on the VDS screen. They can reveal problems with various thermal management systems for the PEM or high voltage issues. Of course, PEMs running over temperature is usually an indication that you're due for an annual to clean out the blanket of debris, clean the heat sinks, or loose fan ducting for the 2.0 Roadsters. So it's important to do a log file analysis if you're seeing any kind of issues with your car.
I remember when we were looking at the issue with the 2016 batteries and the squishy pedal is what we were calling it. These cars simply wouldn't accelerate, and we had the reports coming in. Nobody knew what was going on. And by taking a Tesla Roadster, our test mule that had the older 53 kilowatt battery, we accelerated it at 100%. It runs fine, but then it gives us a log file. One of the entries in these log files is the second by second telemetry of what's going on when you drive.
Right.
We then compared that telemetry with the telemetry of the one that had acceleration issues. That was probably the biggest single key that led us down the road to realizing that we have an impedance issue, and it was the battery pack itself that was a problem.
Mm-hmm. So the log file came through again. So if you're interested, log file analysis at Gruber Motor Company is free. We have a newsletter out there on our website under newsletters, Roadster newsletters, that tell you how to extract a log file. The basics are you're going to need a 4 gig memory stick. And believe me, those are a little difficult to find these days.
Yes. In fact, we actually put out a tech bulletin just a few months ago because we realized that since 4 gig memory sticks are getting harder and harder to come by, we can give instructions on how to turn an 8 gig stick into a 4 gig partition. Mm-hmm. So we sent that out as a tech tip as well.
So there you have it. And it's a pretty straightforward method. You have to put a folder into the memory stick. It is case sensitive. All of those instructions are in that newsletter. And if you get a chance, review some of the other newsletters. There's some great information there that we've collected over a decade now. Mm-hmm. Tesla AI Girl on X is saying, are you going to the X Takeover? Personally, I am not. I was in Austria 2 months ago at the Euro Takeover, but my son Maximilian is going to be there. So look for a guy that's got a Gruber shirt that looks like this and a lot of camera equipment in his
yes.
Oh, yeah, with him.
And he has a little bit more hair than you do.
He does, yes, indeed. All right. Visium top. Let's go to that image. This comes up periodically. And the first image I'd like to pop up there is called the S-I 1600. The Roadster, there we go. What this is it's a plastic Lexan top that replaces either the soft top or the hard top. From the outside looking in, it looks completely opaque. It looks black. In fact, on a black Roadster, this looks really stunning. Mm-hmm. From the inside, it's like sunglasses. You're able to see outside. It is lighter. It also leaves the roll bar carbon fiber cover, which looks pretty cool on a Roadster, visible, unlike the hard top, which covers it up. And these are about $4,000 with by the time you get done with shipping. This particular one was bought off of eBay for 3,500 euro, I believe. But they are available. And most people love these once they get them because, for a number of reasons, it just feels more airy inside. You get better views. And it is definitely an improvement on the average Roadster. It comes with a set of hardware. And by the way, while we're on the topic of hardware, one of our vendors is a water jet cutting vendor, mm-hmm. and they made us a new batch of hardtop clamps. Those are the things that you sometimes lose when you take off your hardtop. Oh, yeah. You put them in a Ziploc bag. You intend to leave them with the hardtop, but the hardtop gets stored somewhere in your garage, and they get separated. And then when winter comes again, or whenever you put your hardtop on, you can't find your brackets. And they're not off the shelf. They are custom made. They're a convoluted, configuration. We have those in stock. I don't think we've put them on our e-store yet, but they will be available. So if you've lost your hardtop clips. So for those of you interested, here's what the owner said about their Visium top. He said, I bought mine directly from Visium 8 months ago. Very good investment in my Roadster. I think I paid around 4,000 USD, and I chose the most expensive option. And I don't know what the options are for this. If anybody knows and would like to chime in, please let us know. A lot of favorable reports on this. Let's see here. Andy Nickel says he sold his, and the prospective owner confirmed with Visium that these are still actively in production.
Which is really cool too. Do you think that it's because of the similarity between the Roadster and the Lotus Elise that they're able to make a top that fits either one?
It's possible. And I don't know, and I should know this, whether the two are interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Final portion of the podcast here is VIN 1124. That was the carbon fiber Roadster that was shipped here years ago, bricked, and after a body shop repaired the yellowing clear coat.
Mm-hmm.
It sat here for 2.5, 3 years or so, waiting for a Tesla replacement battery pack, main battery pack, because it was bricked beyond recovery. This was during a time that Tesla wasn't making them yet, and then when they did, they had an influx of demand, which created a long queue, about 2 years. Well, this car was purchased by Carl Medlock and by Jameson Cummings from Joost de Vries, one of the early managers at Tesla, and it went up to Carl's shop in Seattle. They put a replacement battery pack in it, cleaned it up a bit, and it went to auction. Bring a trailer. And the price that it eventually reached was $182,000. There was a lot of social media attention for this car,
Right.
because it was a one-of. It had a number of design improvements that would eventually, if they had stayed with the program, have been aftermarket items that Tesla would have offered for the first generation Tesla Roadster.
Mhm.
Well, that was not to be. So the car sold. It did not meet reserve at 182, but the latest report we have is that it looks like a deal was finally struck, and it may be going to Sweden.
Well, congratulations to the buyer on this particular car. I remember seeing it. One of the most stunning cars I've ever seen of any make or model.
Mm-hmm. It was one of our most popular Roadsters in our service center when people came by for tours, and it definitely was pedigreed. Well, that wraps up another Tesla Roadster session. We do these every Tuesday at 11 a.m. and Mountain Standard Time. For those of you interested in topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to email us at ev@gruber.com.
Mountain Daylight Time right now.
Mountain Daylight.
Mountain Standard Time's hour ahead right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And we always enjoy it when you join us.